Well, I'm working my way through this Retina IIIC. I've cleaned up various components, rangefinder, major body components, top cover. I've just about finished with the shutter. I'm just about to put that back in its outer case. Now, looking at this outer case, I don't know whether you can see in there, it's pretty uniformly dirty with sticky grease and possibly some rub marks in the brass there. And this piece here, which is the curved pusher that runs around the inside of that rack, and it is in turn pushed by the toothed rack. Now, unlike the Retina IIA, where it's just one continuous toothed rack, on a Retina IIA the toothed rack is pushed forward by the action of the film advance, and as the film advance lever goes back to the rest position, the curved rack goes back to its rest position. On the 3C type cameras, the curved rack does do exactly the same thing, but this is the piece that the curved rack pushes. Now, there's nothing to push this back out of the way, back into its rest position, other than the action of the shutter itself. And as this lever comes back to its rest position, then that will in fact push that back out of the way. Now, what happens is, if this is all sticky with grease, the spring here can't push it back out of the way quick enough, and so you will find that you might have a perfectly functional shutter, no problem in the shutter at all its timing is quite correct. But at the higher speeds, once it's assembled into here, you'll find that you get the higher speeds are noticeably slow, and it's because they have to push a sticky curved rack like this back out of the way, and it's just not happening. So I've got to clean these components up. Hopefully that'll go smoothly. Now I've come to the time when I need to deal with this exposure meter. Now, already know something about the exposure meter. We know that the needle sticks, it doesn't swing freely, but it does in fact swing. So I'm looking closely at the meter now. And the plastic cover looks a little bit odd to me there. It's got the corner chewed off. It looks like it's been re-glued. It may not originally have been on that meter. So first I need to remove this circlip. And lift off this plate here. That serves to swing the follower needle backwards and forwards. I'm checking the action of the follower needle. It doesn't appear unduly stiff. They often are. The top cover here is held in by two screws, typically sealed with black paint. You can see the state of this here, it's a bit of a mess. Something's been spilt on here. This is solvent damage. The white patch, I'm not sure what that is. The solvent damage typically results from someone squirting solvent into an area of the camera, possibly around the film advance and cocking rack area, and allowing it to run in, and basically it just melts the plastic. Just backing these screws out enough to clear them from the hole in the plastic case. That cover's reluctant to lift off. Oh, I've backed the screw right out now. I hate doing that because these are very fiddly. Lift the cover off, and now I can see the meter movement. Now I immediately see that the plate here on the top is buckled and I can see rubbish on the armature here. A tiny thread of something there, a little bit of something, and I can see small particles stuck to the armature further down. So this meter has taken a real pounding. I'll check the two screws that hold the movement into the case. They are in fact tight. Well, this plate on the top of the meter is certainly buckled up, so I want to remove that and straighten that out. So I'll remove the two screws. There's an awful lot of metal filings here. This is magnetic, of course, and there's a large number of metal filings. How they've come to get into the meter I don't know. But to be sticking to it, they must be a ferrous material. Now, the movement has a hairspring top and bottom. Now they're much like the hairspring in a watch. They should be working in a single plane and they should be undistorted. This is all pushed to one side. Basically that means that instead of a neat spiral, it's pushed to one side so that the various curls of spring are sitting together. They're tight together so they won't slide over each other, so that the spring won't swing freely. So I know that that's a problem for a start. And I'm picking out tiny fragments of iron filings, and when I say tiny fragments, these are much thinner than a human hair. They're and there's plenty of them. What happens is these tiny threads of iron filing will stick to the centre core of this, the armature on here, and basically it stops this from swinging freely. There's also the possibility that the armature is off its pivots. These little tiny metal fragments, amongst their other useful properties of sticking to the magnet and potentially causing the movement to fail to swing freely, is that they could also short out that electrical contact. Wow, there's lots of them. Oh. Well, one thing we can say with some certainty is that these tiny iron or steel fragments didn't arise from the camera having been dropped. They may have some other cause altogether. The meters are reasonably well closed up to prevent the ingress of anything getting into the meter. And the size of these fragments is extremely fine. Oh, that really seen anything quite like this before in a meter. I wonder whether they've come off a grinding wheel, whether the camera's been used in an environment where a grinding wheel or similar has been used to you can see how it responds to light, but it sticks. As I cover the cell with my finger and I tap this, it comes back to the 0 position. And as I tap it and allow the window light to fall on it, it goes up to the upper position. Now what I really expected to find in here was that the movement was off its pivots, which of course creates friction and stops the movement swinging freely. I wasn't expecting to find it full of iron filings. I'm trying to pick them out with a pair of fine tweezers. I have to be very careful because the movement here, that wiring is exceptionally fine, and the amount of steel here is just quite remarkable. I'm not even sure you can create filings that size with a grinding operation. I wonder whether something's been scraped near it. I may have to remove the whole meter from the case. In order to do that, I've got to unsolder it at this point, and at this point remove the 2 screws from the base of the case and then lift the meter movement out. I think I'm going to have to do that. I'll be back once I've achieved that. Well, here is the movement from the meter. I'll have to stick it onto something steel to put it somewhere stable. That'll do nicely. A pair of pliers. That's quite a strong magnet, and it'll give me a chance to look and see what I can see from underneath the meter and remove any little needles of steel that I see. It's very stiff in its movement. And I can see small particles still stuck to the armature. So I'm going to have to work my way through this, picking out small particles until I've got that clear. And then I'll turn my attention to the pivot bearings in case there's a problem there. Alright, I have my meter movement now all back together. I've removed a lot of iron filings. I've also reshaped the hairspring. It appears to work quite smoothly now and certainly swings back to the rest position without any problem. So I'm going to put it back in the case, solder the connections back to the selenium cell and see what sort of meter response I get. If it swings reliably and freely, I think we've won. I still haven't decided what the source of those iron particles were. I suppose it's vaguely possible that that came from steel wool, Very fine steel wool is often used as an abrasive, particularly in some woodworking operations. How it would come to be in here, it would be a mystery, but if it's been carried in the air, it could find its way down through the top cover and into the meter. I also noticed that the plastic window on this meter doesn't appear to be original. It certainly appears to have been glued back on at some stage. It may mean that that window was missing entirely at some stage in the life of the meter, and so there was a great big window of opportunity for foreign objects to fall in. I don't suppose we'll ever know. Okay, off to do some soldering. As you can see, I've got the meter reassembled with the cover back on it. I haven't put the follower needle adjuster back on there yet, but you'll see that the meter responds nicely to light, swings across the full width of the scale, and is back working as the meter should work. So what was the answer? Well, mostly it was those iron filings. They were 90% of it. Even after I'd cleaned it, was quite happy that it was all good to go. It connected it back up to the selenium cell. It just wanted to swing halfway across the scale and then stop. And when I peered back in there again with my super duper glasses, I could see that there was a tiny thread of steel still sitting there on the armature, or one that had reappeared. And once that was removed, it was good. So the meter has certainly been repaired before, at least to the extent that the plastic on the top had been replaced with something that's not original. If the camera had spent some time without that present, it means there's every likelihood that a thread of plastic loose there. I'll just lift that off. There's every likelihood that that would have left it open for foreign objects to get in. But as for those iron filings, I don't think we'll ever know. They're extremely fine. Super duper fine steel wool's the only thing I can think of that would have threads of steel that fine. They certainly aren't something that came off a lathe. It don't look like anything that would come off a grinding operation. They were just very, very, very tiny, fine threads. Okay, that little problem looks like it's been dealt with. I can move on with the rest of my reassembly. I think the next place that I'll be hitting up against the stops will be working on the film advance shaft in order to get the cam on the end of the film advance shaft to be firmly fixed. Well, hopefully they'll get it firmly fixed. If not, that will be getting replaced. I have the camera partly reassembled now. Got the focus helical, all the front bellows struts and shroud and things all back in the body. Fitted the rewind knob, tripod socket at the base, put in the lock lever and the release lever here. And the next thing to go into the body, of course, is this advance shaft for the film advance. I'll zoom you in a bit. That's probably enough. And here you can see that it's got a quite distinct wiggle. Now it almost certainly means that the camera's been dropped on its base, that the film advance lever has taken the brunt of it, and that's transmitted the load through to this disc here that's fixed to, and that in turn has stressed up the point where it's riveted onto the end of the shaft. I'll zoom you back out, this camera's struggling. The end of the shaft's riveted over at this point to hold the cam plate on, and that's just come loose. So what I'm going to attempt to do is to take a punch and do multiple punch marks around the inside of this surface here with a view to tightening that thing back up on the shaft. It'll either be successful or it won't. I've found cases, what often happens of course is that the shaft itself gets bent as part of this whole business of the camera being dropped. So it's not just a case of the riveting not doing its job anymore, it's the case of the shaft being bent. So I won't know that till I try. So I'll be back hopefully with some success. Not only do we have to have this fixed on the shaft firmly, it also has to be fixed at 90 degrees to the shaft. So if it's off at an angle, you would have the film advance lever would be swinging through an angle like this as it went, rubbing against the bottom of the body. So it's got to be all nice and square and nice and tight. Wish me luck. Well, that appeared to be successful, so I'm going to lubricate this now and put it back in the body, and hopefully it'll do the job for me. It looks square enough at the moment, but the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. So doubtless you're all dying to know how that worked out. Well, it worked out well. Film advance lever is firm on there now, no movement. It doesn't rub against the bodywork at any place, so that's all good. I've got a chrome trim on there to replace the original that was damaged. It's by no means perfect, but I didn't have to do anything to the body itself, just the chrome trim. So I'm going to clean that chrome trim up now and I can put the leatherette back on it. Otherwise the camera is coming along quite well. Well, the saga of the dropped camera has pretty much come to an end now. It's all back together again, all working smoothly. The major problems along the way were the loose film advance shaft. The cam on the end of that was loose. Here at the end of the body, the back catch release had been thumped in as the camera had been dropped. The release I was able to straighten back up. That's the original release. The chrome trim was heavily damaged at this point. I've had to replace that with another one. It's very hard to panel beat chrome plated brass without it looking uglier when you're finished than when you started. It was entertaining getting this back in place because the tripod socket's been abused. Someone has screwed something tight in there and it's basically flared it out, so it makes it very hard to get this cover off over the top, and it's even more entertaining trying to get the cover back on again without disturbing the position of the spring that returns this little bracket. At the other end of the base plate, the leatherette was very damaged at this corner. I was able to cut a patch into that. You can't see it. This is the original leatherette patch off the film advance lever. Once I'd got rid of all that double-sided tape rubbish from the back of it, it was able to glue back down smoothly. It looks fine. The camera, apart from that, just the normal sort of dust and dirt and dried grease, things of that nature. Focus is nice and smooth now. At the top of the camera, the number one problem here, or the most noticeable problem of course, was that the meter was very reluctant to respond correctly. The movement just would stick part way across the motion range, and that was of course due to two major problems. The little hairspring was distorted, it was out of shape, and there were lots and lots of tiny metal, like hairs of metal, hairs of steel, possibly very, very fine steel wall fibres that were through the meter, and they were effectively just sticking to the armature and stopping the movement from swinging through its full range of movement. Apart from that, not much to speak of. I've replaced the damaged chrome screw off the top of the meter. That was ugly beyond normal use. At the top here, the rewind knob had been not assembled correctly. It wasn't tightened down so that the film reminder dial was just flopping about. That's been dealt with. And anything else apart from that? Not much really. It was fairly straightforward apart from those things. Just the usual things that give cameras trouble when they're 60 years old. Dust and dirt and dried grease. Sand to remind you of all the beaches you've been on. Things of that nature. Alright, thanks for watching.